This is the session where we are going to cover a massive amount of short 2 to 5 minute activities that you can tack onto your already existing classroom structure so that you can get students to use the words that you want them to learn. So let me give you a preview of what this might feel like through chatting about a word that is probably more relevant to your students than the last word we learned, peripatetic. We are going to learn the word courageous. So let's try out what we've learned when introducing new words. So we're going to say the word courageous, and I'm going to give you some examples. My daughter was courageous when she overcame her fear of heights to climb to the top of a very large water slide. Teachers are courageous when they give presentations to their entire staff. But when I avoid hard conversations, I'm probably not being courageous. Courageous means to be brave or to face fear or danger. So this was the introducing a word part. But remember, the point of vocabulary instruction is to get students using the word and developing understanding of the concepts attached to that word. And we do that through structured talk. So here's an example of an activity that we could have students do that is very short. Remember, the goal of these is not to take up a lot of time, but rather getting students to use words that we want to see repeated. So let's try and add nuance to this word courageous by having a conversation with some frameworks. One activity might be to ask students to think about which of these examples is the most courageous. If Superman flies in to try and stop a robbery from taking place, is that more or less courageous than some of these examples, such as a little brother going to bed with the lights off for the very first time? Remember, our goal is to have students develop their own understanding of the mountain of subtext behind each of these words. So we're going to cover some more of these activities throughout this session's video. All right, we are going to fly through some different strategies that you can use when introducing words to students. We're going to start with some strategies geared towards younger learners, but all of these can be modified to work with any group of students. Sometimes, depending on the student group I'm working with, I call these not activities, but more so games to get students excited about playing with words. So our first game is called Does This Make Sense? So I'm going to say a sentence and ask you if it makes sense. With these activities, we always want to work with partners so that students can work through their thinking orally. So they're going to say yes or no if it makes sense, and you would want them to say why they think that one way or the other. Let's use our second example. The wicked mom helped her daughter tie her shoe. Does that sentence make sense? And students would tell each other yes or no and explain why. In many of these strategies, you will have introduced multiple words for students to use, so you can pick them up after they've collected a couple words or in alignment with introducing any of those words. Strategy number 2 is called What Does It Mean? We're going to use the words from this list: wicked, reliable, and honest. And I'm going to tell you one of our words and give you 2 options for what it might mean. And you have to say the word and pick up the right one. So, does wicked mean nice or mean? And students would talk about it. Activity number 3, word connections. I'm going to say a word that's similar to one of our words on our list, and you have to say with your partner which word it makes you think of. So, what does telling the truth make you think of? Hopefully, students remember their list of words and they land on the word honest and can tell you why. Activity number 4, pure imagination. I'm going to ask a question, and the question is going to describe something that might happen. So make sure you listen carefully to our words as I ask each question. So, what would a wicked person do at a restaurant? And students will have to develop an example of that sentence. This one is a little bit more theatrical. Activity number 5, lights, camera, and action. I'm going to describe somebody using one of our words and tell you something that they did. And I want you to stand up and act out what you heard with a partner. So, act out a wicked witch turning someone into a toad on lights, camera, action. And then students would act out that scene. Activity number 6, finish that sentence. I'll start a sentence using one of our words, and I want you to finish it telling your partner. So the honest kid lost something at school, and when his mom asked him where it was, how would the honest kid respond? Activity number 7, would you rather? So I'll ask you a question using 2 or more of our words, and you have to explain your response to your partner. So would you rather have a wicked friend or an honest friend? Remember, all of these are trying to develop context around the words we want students to use. Activity 8, pick a word, any word. I'm going to say something that might have happened, and I want you to connect it to one of our words. So if someone has always helped feed a pet, would they be reliable or wicked, and why? Those are good introductory activities. But we said before in previous sessions that every word has beneath it this mountain of context. So some example and non-example activities help students to develop their understanding of the concepts behind some of these words. The easiest example, non-example structure is what I call yay or nay. So I am going to give you an example, and if you think it matches our word claim, you would say yay, and if you think it doesn't, you would say nay, and then you would explain why or why not. So when you ask the teacher a question, are you making a claim, yay or nay? Another variation of example, non-example is our activity number 10, this or that. Students have to choose which of 2 alternatives illustrate the target word. And with either choice, they have to explain their response to a partner. So which would be easier to notice? A house alone on a hill or a house crowded in among other buildings? Activity number 11, would you rather? So students have to choose which of 2 alternatives illustrate the target word. So would you rather want the people who make our school lunch to be versatile or frugal? And hopefully they talk about how maybe opponents of public schools would like them to be frugal because they would like to focus on good stewardship of taxpayer money. But students might want their lunch people to be versatile because they can use very common ingredients in maybe new and exciting or delicious ways. And our final variation of an example, non-example activity would be something very similar to the last one, but has more nuance. So I say this is activity number 12, nuance matters. So if you had a very special photograph of a friend who had moved away, would you refer to it as a memento or as a talisman? Here, you're taking 2 very similar words that have meanings that require a lot of context, and students are trying to determine which is the more appropriate use. Our next batch of student activities have to do with developing word associations. Activity number 13 is target acquired. So which sentence goes hand in hand with the target word? So if I say, you're so lucky that I am part of your team, would that be tedious, extravagant, or pretentious? Activity 14, put in a sub. I'm going to say a sentence, one that goes with each of our words. And with a partner, I want you to restate the sentence using one of our vocabulary words instead and explain why you substituted that vocabulary word in the sentence. So, for example, if I read the sentence, I'm going to grow my writing skills, I would look at the word bank that we've talked about to see which word fits best in the sentence and then substitute that word in the sentence. The next batch of word activities have to do with generating context. Number 15 is called Connect the Dots. I'm going to ask students to come up with a connection. It can be a person, a movie, a common experience, and I want you to use the words that we have chatted about to explain the connection you see. For example, if I was trying to make a connection using the word eloquent, I might say that John F. Kennedy was an eloquent orator because people still talk about his speeches to this day. Number 16, whose job is it anyway? So I'm going to put together different types of jobs and connect them with the words that we've been working on. And when I put the 2 words together, they're going to have to tell their partners how those 2 words would go together in real life. For instance, if I chose the word postal worker and put it with the word develop, I might say a postal worker might develop her skills at delivering the mail quickly by practicing each day, because develop means to grow or change over time. Number 17, trifecta tryouts. So trifecta is 3. So I'm going to provide a situation using one of our vocabulary words, and your challenge is to come up with 3 examples, a trifecta, to fit that situation. So name a trifecta of things that have a structure. So students might say our classroom has a structure, or they might say DNA has a structure, but they're developing examples of their own. Number 18 is your teacher said, what? What would make me say this to students? And after I say each imaginary quote, turn and explain your response to a partner. The first example being, this class sure likes to express itself. What did the class just do that made me say that to the class? Activity number 19, theory time. You generate some theories related to the questions. So a teacher would say each question, and then students would have to turn and explain their responses to a partner. For example, if I say, what might someone who is frugal say when looking at the price tag on a new coat? You might answer, they already have a coat that works just fine, and they don't like spending their money unless they really think they need it. This batch of activities has to do with developing word relationships. Activity number 20, mashup remix. How might these two words be connected or related? So if I gave you the word compassionate and advocate, students might come up with an example such as a compassionate lawyer might act as an advocate for someone who is in need. But their goal is to develop a connection between two seemingly unconnected words. Question number 21, question and connection. Students want to develop reasoning behind a connection to the question, and they're thinking behind that reasoning. So could someone who is curious also be a nuance? Then they'll answer that question to try and provide context. Activity number 22, read, sort, label. So this is a great strategy for tier 3 words. You'll collect 10 to 15 words or words that students recognize knowing the least about, and you can have students sort them into 3 meaningful groups. So these words can only go in one category. So you're going to ask students their reasoning with their sort, but you're going to have students label their different groups and then resort them. So if you want, you can add 3 to 5 more words into the mix and see how they change it up after they had sorted their initial batch. Alternatively, if you wanted students to compare and contrast some of these ideas, you could create a triple Venn diagram and see which words overlap in which categories. Activity number 23, Goldilocks. Find the just right home for these words based on the categories provided. So if I gave you the categories of words that describe people or words that describe places, could you determine where each of our words go and develop reasoning behind your thinking? Activity number 24, word continuum. You're going to place phrases on a line and explain their placement based on the question asked. So how surprised would you be if an extremely fragile plant survived in an Arctic region? So there's a continuum of least surprise to most surprise, and students would have to determine where that situation would land and explain why. Finally, here are some activities that encourage students to use new words in writing. The first activity with writing is activity number 25, sentence stems. You can give students sentences and have them show off what they know about the highlighted word by completing the sentence. So, for example, the king was miserable because, and students would complete the word and hopefully match the context. Students could complete these sentences individually or in groups, or you can assign several words to groups and they could write sentence stems of their own. Then they could switch papers with another group and complete the stems of their peers. Finally, activity number 26. This is called a word prompt. Use several of our words in a short writing assignment. So you can give students a premise, or if they are more tier 3 words or tier 2 words that are flexible enough to be used in any of their setting, you can encourage them to use them in any assignment that you had given. Let's see if you can put a lot of the thinking that we've worked on over the last several sessions together as you develop your own mini vocabulary lesson plan. Identify 2 to 3 words that you want to introduce to students. Tell me why you chose those words. Develop student friendly examples and non examples and definitions for those words. And then pick out a couple of these instructional activities or other instructional activities that you have come across in your reading.